do you think injury is something that is okay and it's something you should be able to deal with, or you think like injuries are totally and should be avoided at all costs?
Injuries are abnormal period for anything. However, it doesn't mean that you're not going to tweak something here and there, that you're not going to get an injury. Anyone can get hurt doing just about anything, even functional patterns. I've been hurt doing functional patterns.
It is good to be well muscled. We know this. It's good for your longevity. It's good for your bone density. It's good for your body, because over time you'll lose muscle. So why don't many of those individuals have muscle? There's no reason why you have to have one without the other.
I don't really see a lot of high-level athletes coming from their practice. And we have a microphone right here that's empty. And anyone from Functional Patterns can come over here to this empty microphone. I would love to get into more discussion with them rather than them just clipping this. It'd be great if they actually would show up here and be on the show.
Mark, do you still doodle on like composition books and stuff?
I haven't like written anything in a while. And if like I had to sign some papers not too long ago, and it was actually really hard. I was like, oh my God, I need to like get back to using my journal.
Because was your handwriting like absolute dog shit or something?
Yeah, I mean, it's never been good anyway. And like now it's like worse, but
it's regressed to a second grade level.
Yeah, we're getting down there. We're getting kicked out of school with my handwriting at this point.
My handwriting's
but I do like to doodle.
Bad. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I'm very doodly. Do you doodle?
No, I want to though. But here's like it's just really dumb. But like when I'm taking notes and stuff, I get upset that I can't rearrange it, and then I'm like, I don't want to mess up, so I'm not even going to bother writing that down. And then on top of that, I never reference my notes. For the podcast, it's a little bit different. But like if I'm reading a book or I'm watching a video, I'll write shit down and I'll just go back to the thing. I never look back at my notes. Oh,
fuck, it got in my eye.
Oh.
That's the one thing about like the
powder.
Yeah, the athletic greens thing. It's
that's
great.
one way to get it in the system is just
through your eyeball.
Through your eyeball.
Yeah, ocular
straight to the brain.
Insemination. That's actually not even.
You just say it with confidence and then you're good.
Yeah. That's one thing. The powder is just like that's that shit.
It's very fine.
Yeah. So when you like open the bag, you don't want to be right over the bag. Right. That's why they give you that thing that you put in your fridge. That's like a metal container because like it
goes in the fridge.
I think maybe I just put mine in the metal container in the fridge. It can be outside of the fridge.
Okay, I'm like,
it can be outside of the fridge.
Like,
Andrew's like, is mine going bad?
Yeah,
that'd be rough if their shit was like hardcore perishable.
Yeah. Glad it's not.
Yeah,
I would never take it if it was hidden in the fridge though.
Yeah.
Anyway, are you doodling over there? Is that why you brought it up?
Yeah, so I'm looking down at my notes and like I got one page where I have questions from a previous podcast. I have notes from a different podcast, and then I have a title right here that says Saturday School with yesterday's date and then nothing. And so I'm like, do I keep filling out this page that is empty, or do I start a fresh page? And I turn the page and I actually have questions from an even older podcast, and then I just have 18 minutes break and then nothing else. I have no idea what that even means.
And it's like, who wrote this?
Yeah, it wasn't me, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. I tend to like circle stuff and then put stuff in like boxes and squares and then put a star next to it and stuff. And then I still have no idea what any of that means. But I do it as if I know exactly what it's going to mean. And then when I come back to it, I never have any idea what it is.
Like, there's no way I'm going to forget what this is. This is
star,
genius.
double star, circle.
This is going to get me to $1 billion.
And then you don't have any idea what it was.
Okay.
I think Nsima is probably more organized.
Than you two?
With notes.
Writing.
With notes, I believe, yes. Yes. I with at least more organized than you guys, right? But it doesn't mean I'm very organized. That's kind of a low bar to
this is true.
beat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
I got my own.
But I mean, with something like taxes, y'all are definitely way better than me. Way more organized than me.
My organization is called Andy.
It's called having a wife, yeah.
My kids come to me too, and they're like, hey, where's mom? Like they never like.
Where's the source of information
they're gonna
that we need?
Yeah.
Like, hey, Dad, where's Mom? I have a question.
Some real important
That's what
stuff.
they do, yeah.
How does that make you feel?
It gets me out of a lot of work. I guess.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sometimes they're like, I don't know, poking around in the kitchen for stuff, and I'm like, I can make you something. They're like, no, I'm good, and they go right back to their room.
I've eaten some of your shit, man. It tastes pretty good.
I'm like,
That's
damn.
great. Yeah.
You make some good tasting food.
Very good.
They actually will both eat it, but most of the time they want Mom. You know, a sandwich from Mom or like something like that from your mother. It's like there's no competing with that.
Well, and they know that if like, okay, we'll just use a sandwich as an example. Like they know the one that you make is just going to have like piles of like protein on it. And they're going to be like, fuck, like, dude, I just wanted
to put some protein powder on their sandwich.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, dude, I just wanted like a basic ham and cheese. And now I got bacon, avocado,
protein bagel or some
he
shit.
poured MCT oil powder all over it.
What more needs to be on a sandwich than like bread, meat, sauce, and cheese?
Yeah, not much more.
Is there anything else?
Some people like lettuce and tomato and stuff. That's
Weird.
Yeah.
That is weird.
I'm not a fan.
Who does that?
Go totally without. I don't need that extra wetness. Like I like warm meats and warm sandwiches. So like when I put this thing together, I want it all to have like a nice warmth.
Yeah, like if I was to go to like In-N-Out and get a burger, I might get onions on it.
Yes.
But I definitely wouldn't get a tomato because I'm like, tomato kind of drowns out a lot of the other flavor. I don't like that.
Yeah.
But I understand some people like the lettuce because there's like a crunch to it, but
It's all filler.
it doesn't really work.
And then at In-N-Out,
But onions though, right?
onions are great. But
onions a game changer.
at In-N-Out, if one tomato doesn't cover the entire like patty or
whole
maybe
thing
the entire
slides.
bun, they have to put 2 in it to cover the entire sandwich. So that's why you get so many tomatoes at In-N-Out. And I mean, whatever, they're fresh. I ain't fucking with them.
That's why I'm happy. Like my mom still lives close because I'll go over there to get because I don't eat greens. So she blends all that shit and I'll put some. Yeah, I'll just get some athletic greens because you need greens in your system. But I'll put that in my green juice. And it's just like I'm getting the shit that I should be getting. You know, leafy greens are good for you.
Your mom probably has a setup going on for that, huh?
Oh yeah, we like I see her more than I go and get the greens. But like every time I go and get the green juice, I pick up maybe 12, right? So then we go back, restock. It's pretty great.
That's cool.
Mixing up potions. I like it.
Dude, it makes a difference. Like the digestion's better. The consistency of the what's better. And I'm saying that just because some of our viewers and listeners don't like a lot of the shit talk, right? Some people are appalled. So, but the truth is having good consistency, it does make a difference. No more bloody battles.
Let's talk about some of this injury stuff.
Bloody.
Sorry.
Yeah, every once in a while, right? It's totally normal.
So wipe a little too hard.
Yeah.
A little too vigorous.
Yeah, after Taco Tuesday or something. Anyway, sorry, Mark.
I would have to say that I think that injuries are pretty common. And I think that injury and pain are like part of sport in a way. But are they like part of training? And should they be part of training? I think is something that we should just discuss today.
And if you're listening, please answer Mark's question right there. Before we get into this, do you think injury is something that is okay and it's something you should be able to deal with, or you think like injuries are totally and should be avoided at all costs?
Yeah, and it's hard because we'll have to kind of define like an injury. I guess I would define an injury maybe for the sake of the show of saying like something that takes you out, something that takes you out from doing the thing that you love doing for like multiple days. So not just like a little tweak in the calf type thing, not like, oh man, something in the elbow or my shoulder feels a little weird today. But it's something where you're like, no, I'm not going to jiu-jitsu today. Like I'm definitely not going today. Like my neck feels weird. Same with training, it's not just like, holy shit, my quads are really sore, or maybe I did like a slight pull in my groin, but I'm still going to go in and do upper body work. Like not that kind of thing. Like an actual thing that debilitates you to the point where it's definitely not in your best interest to go and do what you're doing. I think in sport, you have to deal with like somebody else's body a lot of times, or you're reacting to something somebody else did. So in the case of something like tennis, in tennis, I don't know a ton about tennis, but it seems like the person's trying to like hit the ball in a spot that makes it difficult for you to get to. And they'll kind of repeatedly do that. And they try to like set you up to make it harder and harder. Maybe they give you a couple easy ones and they put one in a weird, shitty spot.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, because you're like in this compromised position trying to hustle to the ball, you tweak something in your ankle, you know, and you get injured. So I think in sport, it's going to happen. I think we can build resilience through training. I think there's a lot of things we can do, but I don't know if we have enough information still to this day of how much different stuff to do and how many things to incorporate in order to avoid injury completely, especially in a sport like rugby or football or soccer, basketball.
Yeah.
Basketball and like volleyball, those are interesting sports. Like, how do you avoid getting injured from landing on somebody else's foot? Like, that's a tough thing to figure out. You jump in the air and somebody else jumped around the same time you did, and now your sneaker hits their sneaker at the same time, you know, at the same time, and you roll. It's like, I don't know, like, we can make a more durable ankle, and we can look into having like better shoes and stuff. Those are all, and we can look into having better courts or better fields. Those are all really good options, but I still don't think we get home scot-free out of getting an injury.
Let's just watch this video because I think it'll give a lot of context. It's another video from this guy, John Nielsen at Functional Patterns, and he's making some commentary on a professional. His name's Gabo Saturno, and Gabo makes a lot of amazing content. Gabo is well-muscled, has amazing movement ability in general, but he injured himself a little bit doing this movement. So let's see this.
I hope he uses the little John beat again. Hoping.
John beat? Does this sound?
The little John beat?
Yeah, but you got the sound on, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you heard that pop?
Oh.
You good? Yeah. Did it pop?
Oh, did that make you cringe? Yeah, same here. Very interesting read in the caption of this video. This gentleman mentions that injuries are normal, that you should experience them from time to time in your training. Injuries are not normal, and unless you get hit by a truck, and that's on and off the sports field, you shouldn't be getting hurt from your exercise program. And this is especially prevalent with these influencers that promote stretching and flexibility, pushing the body into greater and greater ranges of motion, thinking that there's no boundary to where the joints can go. Well, there is, and these people get hurt, and they hide it. Let's look at the comments. There's a very famous page in here, knees over toes. And it seems that sometimes his knees are going beyond the toes, where you get a little bit of pop, a little bit of snap, a little bit of crackle, all for said athleticism. We're here to tell you that stretching in and of itself is going to lead to less stability in your joints over time and less elasticity in your muscles. So you don't need more flexibility, you need to move correctly. We're always talking about standing, walking, running, and throwing. These motions give you flexibility without sacrificing your joint stability because you're not passively lengthening the muscles and ligaments to the point of no return.
I think you had some good points in there. For those of you that maybe weren't watching, it showed an individual doing a pigeon stretch with their leg up on a box while their knee was on the ground. So they're in this kind of elevated pigeon stretch position, which is, for some people might be extreme. And the guy ended up popping something in his knee. Mm-hmm. I want to address talking about injuries being normal. I would agree with that statement. I think that injuries are abnormal period for anything. I think that should be the way that we think about injuries. They should be abnormal. If someone's like, I get hurt every other week from lifting, I end up getting slightly injured. Well, we would say, well, that doesn't seem normal. Like that doesn't seem right. However, it doesn't mean that you're not going to tweak something here and there, that you're not going to get an injury. I think when we're talking about training, though, I do think that you should be able to avoid a lot of injuries in training. I don't know if you can avoid all of them all the time. It depends on what you're training for. When you start to think about potentially training for powerlifting or weightlifting, those are two sports where the actual training itself is the sport. So that's kind of confusing and kind of interesting because now you're actually playing the sport every time you go into the gym.
But like even on the topic of powerlifting and weightlifting, yes, the training is the sport, but even so, if an athlete isn't going to max every single week and not every single session's at an RPE 10 and they're warming up well, right? And they're doing the things that they need to do, injuries won't be common. But then you see the lifters who are going way harder than they should be because they want to get strong fast. They want to lift heavier weights like faster than they're ready for. And then injuries are super prevalent with those lifters. So it's like there are still concepts that can keep you away from getting injured in your training.
We talked about the Eastern Bloc lifters, the Russian lifters. Sometimes you watch the Olympic weightlifting team from like China and stuff like that. It seemed like they just have, not to diss our friends here in the United States, but it seems like they have more discipline in staying within weight ranges and with keeping form and technique being the most important thing. And I'm not saying those people don't get hurt. I have no data on any of that information. They probably get hurt a lot, just like anybody else that's competing in a sport. I think once you start to compete in a sport, you're going to start to run into injuries, and I think you're going to start to run into injuries in your training. But I still think that it shouldn't be the norm. I think that you should be able to avoid it. I'm agreeing with what you said. I think that you should prioritize. If you prioritize a handful of other things, then injury should be something that is not very common.
The thing that I do like John Nielsen, and I like concepts from functional patterns because like they approach things in a different way than a majority of people that lift. They approach it from a movement perspective. But I really do seem to think that a lot of the stuff that they talk about has people live in fear somewhat, because when you're trying to improve your movement ability, like I grapple, I do jujitsu, and I need certain abilities that are abnormal. I need to be able to actively move in certain ranges of motion that I wouldn't need to if I was only focused on bodybuilding or powerlifting. I need those abilities. So my body needs to be strong in these types of vulnerable positions. But if I was consistently and constantly fearful of getting into those ranges of motion because my body's vulnerable there, I wouldn't be able to develop strength in those ranges of motion. And even like in the past, as I've ventured into those ranges and worked on developing not just the passive ability to stretch into those ranges, because I agree with him in that sense, passively stretching all the time isn't going to be the thing. It's like you want to figure out ways that you can load it and become strong there. But as I've done that, there have been times where I bit off a little bit more than I could chew, but I learned from it, right? And because of that, I'm stronger, I move better, and I'm just a much better athlete. But if I was like, this or going to this range of motion or developing this is going to injure me, then I'd never fucking do it. And I'm saying that because there's a trend with functional patterns in some things that they say about certain practices. Like, for example, when I see some of them comment about some of the things that Ben Patrick does with his deep knee flexion and an ATG split squat. And even on this post, responding to Gabo was mentioning how like in this session of training, he made a few mistakes. He has his original post and we'll put it in the description. But he mentioned that number one, he didn't really warm up much. Two, this was after a hard training session. Three, this is a movement that he's never done before while he was tired. And then four, he actually mentioned when it comes to injury, you should just like move on. Like you learn from it. But functional patterns responded with, we have seen your tutorials. The amount of steps you skip are going to lead people down the path of injuries. You have managed to guard your structure for the last 5 years, but we'll see in the next 15 to 20 years how that goes. Stretching as you teach it is a problem. I think honestly, like again, functional patterns, a lot of great stuff from them, but I think this is like such a scared statement.
The unknown.
It's you're giving somebody an unknown. And they say this about like the split squat and Ben Patrick stuff too. It's like that deep knee flexion's good for you now, but just wait 5 years, wait 10 years, wait 15 years. Why are we talking about this whole like I get what they're trying to get
about
at.
Aging.
People say that about aging.
You know, wait till you're 40.
Yeah.
How do I know how you're going to feel when you're 40? Maybe you're going to feel better when you're 40.
Dude, what I know is that by developing these things for years now, my body feels younger, more explosive. I'm more mobile in these ranges that most people think are vulnerable than I've ever been. And it's not like I'm constantly pushing this every single day, but I anticipate that 5 years from now, I'll be even better. 10 years from now, there's no reason I should degrade unless I'm training at an RPE 10 for every single training session and constantly increasing the weight I'm doing when I shouldn't be. Then I'll fuck myself up. But if you have good, like if you're working, making sure you're not working to crazy intensity, you're not always increasing your load, you're training responsibly, you should be able to continue to develop effectively. And their statement is just such a scared statement. It's like, I'm scared of doing jujitsu because 10 years down the road, I could injure my groin or I could rip my knee open like that. The jujitsu athletes, a lot of them, they get ACL injuries. So I'm scared of doing jujitsu because of that. It's not a good mind space for anyone to be. And it's very odd to me that professionals, I get how they want to save people from injury, but this is just making people scared of venturing into things that they should probably be trying out.
Power Project family, we talk about beef and meat all the time on the podcast. That's why we've partnered with Certified Piedmontese Beef. But did you know this? That 85% of all grass-fed, grass-finished beef in the United States is imported from other countries? 85%.
Damn.
But Certified Piedmontese is made in the U.S. of A.
America.
Fuck yeah. So go out and get some of the best tasting, some of the leanest, some of the best beef from Piedmontese. Andrew, how can they get it?
Absolutely. So you guys can head over to cpbeef.com and at checkout enter promo code POWER to save 25% off your entire order. And if your order is $150 or more, you get free 2-day shipping. Again, cpbeef.com. Links to them down in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
Fuck yeah.
I would say also, I think anyone can get hurt doing just about anything, even functional patterns, because sometimes the communication from one person to, from the trainer or the coach, like I've been training forever, you've been training forever, Angie, you've been training for a long time, and you've had your own share of injuries. Even if we're coaching somebody, even if we're on top of them, even if we're, all right, man, you want to deadlift 315 for today? We're going to have you warm up. You have them pull the sled. You have to do all this stuff
because they don't even want people deadlifting.
Right.
I'm joking.
Right. And then sure enough, the person gets hurt. Even in functional patterns, I've been hurt doing functional patterns because I did something that was slightly outside of it because it was a go-to for me. I hyperextended my back a little bit. So even within the confines of that, like they're trying to teach you movement is complex and confusing when your body starts to shape into something that's maybe a little different than the way that the body is quote unquote like meant to move, and you're used to these movement patterns. A movement pattern might be great, like say your foot points out to the side every time you run or something weird like that. Now, when you go to try the intended thing that the coach is saying, hey, keep that foot straight, that actually might hurt you worse in the beginning for a wide variety of reasons. Or you might go to sprint and your old habit might come back. And you were trying to listen to the coach and you were trying to do what they say, but you can get hurt doing just about anything. So I think in this case, where they're saying like, let's see 10, 15 years down the road, that is pretty absurd because we don't know. I don't think we have any data there's not enough data on functional patterns. There's not enough time has went by to even see how well that program works from 15 years. Like I think they're like 10, 12 years old.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that's, okay, I think another thing that's amazing about functional patterns is the focus on developing the patterns that we've done for centuries, running, jumping, throwing, sprinting. Is there anything else?
Walking,
right? Like, is there any other movement stuff that it's just those are the main things, right? Now, because when people get too far into the rabbit hole of just like only lifting, you realize that later down the road, you've lost those abilities. Mm-hmm. For some reason, when you try to run, you're just fucking awkward. You can't sprint. You haven't jumped in a long fucking time, so you don't really jump anymore. And when you try to throw something, you're like, how do you do this again? So having those abilities is good, but then when we have those abilities, what stops us from building on top of that? Why can't we, like when you see someone like a gymnast or anybody who has amazing body weight strength, when you see them move and they have those strength, and it's not like they have the strength that other people have not been able to develop, or someone like a rock climber who climbs and has this dexterous ass fingers, or a jujitsu individual who's very strong and very mobile, and you can put them in these positions and they can squeak out of it. They've developed movement ability on top of the base movement abilities that we've always had, right? So why do we have to stick within the primal or the functional patterns that we've had? Why can't we build on top of that? Which is what someone like Gabo is extremely well muscled, and he does a lot of things that most people can't do because he's ventured into those types of abilities. He's gone into that unknown or those vulnerable spots that most people aren't willing to go down, right? And he's developed an extra level of strength because of it. So I don't get why you can't do that. And you can see the difference between people who have chosen to do that versus people who have not. People who haven't don't move as well sometimes. Maybe they're not as strong or muscular. And I'm not going to say anything to, actually, this is probably going to ruffle some FP feathers, but something that's lacking on their side is muscularity. It is good to be well muscled. We know this. It's good for your longevity. It's good for your bone density. It's good for your body, because over time you'll lose muscle. So why don't many of those individuals have muscle? It's going to, like Gabo has an extremely good structure. He's well muscled and he can move well. He could probably run, jump, sprint, throw. But when you look at a lot of guys from functional patterns, they have these movements, which are great movements, but they all look like the same type of avatar. Barely any muscle. They can move well and they can do their run thing, but there's no muscle there. And I've talked to John actually, and John said that they actually do some bodybuilding stuff and they have bodybuilding concepts. So this, again, I'm saying again, great system, but you're missing that piece. Or maybe you haven't, maybe not many people are going down that piece with what you're doing. This might be clipped from them and it's fine. Right. But the thing is like, there's a hole there. You need muscle and it's good. And you can have a good amount of muscle and you can have a good range of motion and you can run and you can jump and you can sprint and you can throw. There's no reason why you have to have one without the other.
I think that they might feel that muscle isn't super functional. And, you know, in some cases where like, say like you look at it like an extreme level, like a bodybuilder, throwing on a bunch of muscle mass, like just on your arms, like almost like that guy stretching. Like, is that stretch even a good idea? And what's it for? Putting on a ton of bulk just on your arms, is that even a good idea? Like, I understand you might want to do it, but is it a good idea? And does that in some way make you dysfunctional? I would say maybe and maybe not. I don't know. But like if both arms weigh like 3 pounds more than what you're used to, and you're not really building much else of the rest of your structure, maybe it's not ideal for you now to go play baseball with these fucking giant arms and these things like that. So that's where I think you can get like, I don't even really necessarily believe in movements that aren't functional. I think that anything the body can do, the body can do. It's just that we, in some instances, need to be careful with what it is that we do. And I think with stretching, I think that people don't really think about stretching. They don't think about it that much. They're like, oh, I'm going to do the stretch. Like if the three of us right now are like, hey, let's go through these stretches, you'd be like, okay. And you just like go through it. But if we're like, oh, let's all just deadlift, 3 plates, and we'd be like, no, I could get hurt doing that. Like, I don't want to do that out of nowhere. But with stretching, we don't really think that way. And stretching is no different than just about anything else. There's going to be force placed on the muscles. I've hurt myself stretching before. I'm sure you guys have hurt yourself stretching before. Nothing like real serious, but I don't know, you usually learn from it. I do think that injuries in general, I do think that they are part of training. It's part of learning. I've said it before, pain is kind of a mentor. And I don't mean that like that you should always go through so much pain and that you should ignore pain and that you should just grit your teeth and like battle through everything. But I think it is a way for us to learn. And I think there's a reason why a cascade of hormones, a cascade of so many different things are going on in your biochemistry when your body gets to be in an uncomfortable position, when you're too hot, when you're too cold, when you're breathing hard, when the oxygen exchange between the CO2 is starting to change a lot, when you're in when you're training really hard and you're up against the wall and you're like, feel like you're going to die, but you do a couple more reps, things like that. I think there's, within that pain, There's a lot of satisfaction. There's a lot of pleasure in there. In addition to that, there's a lot of reward. Like that's where you can dig deep and get a reward from it. If you're running and you're trying to run an 8-minute mile pace for a couple of miles and you accomplish it, okay, maybe some of it felt hard. Maybe it felt somewhat painful. Maybe you got a little pain in your foot as you're doing some of it. But when you get to the end, you're like, holy shit, that was great. And in some cases, things like that are transformative for people. It like changes their life forever. So I think pain is like, there's gonna be a little, I don't know, whether we want to call it pain or discomfort. Each person is welcome to kind of have their own interpretation, because I don't think you need to be in excruciating pain or it needs to hurt that bad. But I think there's going to be a level of discomfort whenever you're trying to improve upon anything.
I want to ask you both a question also, because again, I know like from what I said, especially about FP, people are going to think I don't like it. It's great. I bought their 12-week online course after you mentioned it. And he has amazing explanations on myofascial release, some things that I really haven't heard other people mention, but actually make really good sense. So I think there's a lot of good there, but I think there's stuff that's missing, and that's okay. Now, the question I have for you guys is, do you think that the way you lift can affect the way you move? Because you said something that's really interesting in the fact that like, yeah, okay, a baseball player that builds big arms, right? Well, that might not be the best for throwing, but do you think that I personally think that the factor of the muscle is how the muscle was built. Do you guys get what I'm saying?
Yeah, the way that you lift, I think, does have a big impact on the way that you move. And interestingly enough, a lot of the studies that are done on like posture and stuff like that, they seem to always revert back to genetics. They don't seem to think that the way you stand and the way you sit has hardly any impact on it. They don't think that training has hardly any impact on it. Mike Israetel just did a video the other day. Maybe you can try to pull it up.
Instagram or YouTube?
Instagram. Okay. I don't even see how that's possible. Like I don't.
You mean like being just genetics?
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
Same.
I think genetics are a big part of it. I think, seeing the way your dad walks and walking a little bit like him, I think all of that makes sense. We learn a lot by observing. We learn a lot by seeing. Yeah. And then what are the habits of the rest of the family? Does the whole family sit on the couch, or is there one kid who sits on the floor, who sits upside down, who sits with his legs crossed, who sits with his legs out wide? Like, I'm just going to imagine that kid is not only going to be able to move better, but maybe support his skeletal structure in a different way. And the same thing with someone that trains, someone that's working out. I don't even know if it's like, it's hard to define some of these things, but I know in working with people and training people before, I've helped people with their posture before, but it's kind of hard to say if I really did, or if it was them being more conscious, of them, like, okay, now they know how to do like a seated row. And so now when they stand, they know how to kind of, contract the rear delts slightly just to kind of tilt the torso up so they're nice and straight, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say like on top of that, also like the volume of training will also affect that. This comes from when I was doing 4 and 5 days a week of jiu-jitsu. I was probably the most stiff I've been like since starting jiu-jitsu. Like I was sore and tight in all these areas, even though jiu-jitsu's putting me in these like long ranges. I didn't want to get back to him because when I get back to him, I was sore in those ranges.
Don't lose your train of thought. I want to add to that for just a second. I think that will make you old fast. I think that can make you old fast if you're not able to recover from it.
Yes.
Because if you're lifting all the time, I did the same thing when I was lifting, and it made me old fast. It's the reason why my fucking spine still doesn't move. I've been working on it a lot. It's super stiff. You make yourself super stiff, and then you start kind of walking around like,
guarding yourself.
Yeah, you're guarding yourself. Like everything is, it's hard to like put into words, but like strength training or something like jiu-jitsu just beats the shit out of you. It's not so much like just like muscle soreness. It's like the whole body's just like, no, like we're good, man. Like this sucks.
Yeah, my mind and body were like, we don't want any more. Like, please just take a day off. Like, don't even get out of bed even. Like, that's how it felt certain days. And even as recent as this week, where like I did something weird to my neck on Monday's training. I don't know what happened, but when I got home, I was like, man, like looking at like the like, is there any traffic coming where I can get into
Your
this
body's
lane?
turning with your
And I'm
neck.
doing
That's happened to me.
and so I'm like, dude, what happened? But like, imagine if I went again Tuesday, Wednesday, you know what I mean? And I kept doing that volume would age me very fast. That was actually perfectly said, because I wouldn't have been able to come up with that one. But that's where I kind of would see it. Like, so even if you are, I'm not familiar with all the functional patterns training, but like if you're doing, in my opinion, I think if you are overtraining that, it's still going to hurt like, you know, that range and that like all those things that you're working on. I think you'll have to regress a little bit because that recovery aspect won't be there.
Yeah, you can cook yourself doing anything. Yeah,
Yeah, and I
even
think
myofascial release stuff.
100%.
Yeah.
There's two things. I'm going to assume that functional patterns probably does a really good job of moderating people's intensity.
Smart.
Because I've seen videos of like people
Yeah, they're
training
too
FP.
smart for
Like
yeah.
they I'm very Naughty has to know. So I'm fairly certain they also moderate people's intensity so they're not doing anything too fast and too quickly and too intensely as to not get injured.
They coach really well. They coach every repetition.
Exactly.
When you work with somebody, yeah.
But the thing is you have to take that concept into the way you lift in terms of your weightlifting routine and in the gym. And the reason why I asked you about the way you lift affecting the way you move, because when you see a lot of people, the most, I know that what I did when I started lifting is I didn't lift to a long range of motion for a lot of my movements. I'm going to use a shoulder press as an example. I'd go here, I'd press up. I'd use a weight that was heavy because I knew that I could come here and I could press, but I wouldn't be able to get all the way down here. And I wouldn't be able to press out of that position. So I'd stay right here and I'd progress the weight right here. But then what happens with my shoulder strength and my shoulder mobility? I'm strong through a certain range and I have power through a certain range, but I'm very weak with certain ranges
Even
too.
from just that old podcast that we saw, your body looked stiffer. You were
100%.
bigger, but your body looked stiffer.
Yeah. My body was stiffer because of the way I was lifting, right? And the focus of my lifts was like progression, weight increases every few weeks, etc. So what that caused me is like, since I was focused on the weight, on the dumbbell or the bar, I wasn't moving through the longest range of motion with my lifts. There was a level of stiffness to the way I lifted because I didn't have power everywhere. When I shifted to increasing the range of motion on my lifts, what did that do? That decreases the load I'm working with, but that improves my strength through a longer range of motion. Now I'm very strong here. So now the odd thing is like, if I wanted to throw, I have the ability to reach. I have the ability in all of these different ranges of motions because I lift in all those ranges of motion. But what's the other thing? Since I'm not focused on always increasing the weight, my intensity is kept in check. So I'm not injuring myself with the weight that I'm lifting anymore. And then also conceptually, nothing I do is at an RPE 10. RPE 10 means that like, unless I choose to like go to failure on a movement, which I sometimes do, it's still a safe level of failure. But a lot of people, every session in the gym, all of their movements are super intense. They leave feeling beat up. They wake up the next day feeling beat up and they put themselves through it again. And then a few weeks down the road, they're really beat up. Whereas your gym workouts can and should make you feel really good. So you can take those concepts into the way you lift, and I believe it can help you become a better mover when you lift. I don't think muscle has to limit you, but I think the way you build that muscle is going to be the thing that limits your movement.
I was thinking more on what Mike Israetel said, and more along the lines of what he was saying was that he didn't feel that strength training and the way that you lift could have a detriment on your posture.
Oh, he doesn't think
He doesn't think it can, and that was interesting. But I think, again, Dr. Mike Israetel is somebody that studies the science, and I think that's what he was referencing. But because you hear people talk about like having like stiff pecs, rolling your shoulder forward. He wasn't a believer in that. He's like, I'm sitting here right now and my pecs aren't flexed. But I don't think he was making a good point. I'm like so many people that lift, their shoulders are way rolled forward.
100%. Like they don't do rear delt work. I know too many people that lift that have that kind of that posture. So it's like, no, I think
and those torn pecs are a lot of times it's from that shoulder being rotated forward. When you go to press, you're already in a compromised position and your pec is just flexing way too hard for the position that you're in.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so let me ask you guys this, like the idea of, and everybody that's listening, just chime in too. Where does that leave us with injury and progressing? Because the thing is like, if you want to build abnormal levels of movement ability or abnormal levels of like strength ability, you'll have to venture into ranges that you haven't before. And if you want to safely do that, you lighten the load, you moderate the intensity so that you're not ever biting off too much more than you can chew. But the thing is, you have to venture into that and unknown if you want those types of results. That means, but that means that you're also toying with potential small, like I know you defined injury as being something that takes you out. It might be something that takes you out for a little bit, or it might be just a little niggle, one of the two. But that's happened to me. That's probably happened to you, and that's probably happened to you.
Yeah, a bunch of times. And I think it depends on what you're training for. Like, what are you after? And if you're just after like a better physique, I don't think you need to get hurt. Like, I think that you could learn and pay attention, and I think you can be careful. I don't think you need to train like that crazy. In talking more recently with Matt Wenning, he and I were talking about how interesting it is how low the percentages are for people that do make a lot of progress, whether it's sprinting, long distance running, lifting. The magic number always falls in this like 70% range. You're like, 70%? Like, that doesn't do anything. But just go ahead and do some math, go ahead and write out your own workout and look at it and pay attention to the back offsets, pay attention to the warm-ups, and you're going to end up looking right in the face of around 70% is going to be where you're at. So when you consider that, when you say like, okay, people can make a lot of progress in the 70% range, and maybe you have to push a little bit here and there to 80%, if you can be between a 7 and an 8 with your perceived effort, there's not a lot of reasons why you should get hurt. And you have to kind of think about like, what is the activity that you're going to do? If you're going to go out and sprint and you haven't sprinted in a long time, well, you need to get used to, like, to me, a sprint, I would say it means you're running as fast as you possibly can. So you might not have the capacity to do that. You got to back way the hell off of that. And then where do people usually get hurt when they sprint? They usually get hurt when they sprint after they've been going for a distance, after they've been going for 20 yards or so. So back it way down, only run 10 yards and run at 70%. You're going to be totally fine. You're going to be able to train that way for a long time. Your hamstrings are going to get bigger. Your calves are going to get bigger. You're going to get sore from that. It's going to be a great workout, and you're going to make tons of progress from that. You're going to get faster from doing that.
The funny thing is, I remember you mentioned, you were talking to me about sprinting one day, because as I was trying to sprint again, because I used to sprint a lot when I played soccer, when I'd go fast, I was watching video. I'm like, wow, my stride is so short right now. But it's like, it's not the safest idea to open up your stride with that same intensity. But I realized after we talked, it's like, oh, if I just lower my intensity a bit, I can really open up my stride like when I played soccer. I just need to go a bit slower to progress. And that's the funny thing, is like, all of these things are the same thing that you can do with lifting. If you want to sprint and you've sprinted before, you can sprint at a lower intensity and open things up and be safe. But if you try to sprint at 100% intensity and open everything up, you'll pull something. If you can lift with a full range of motion on almost anything with adequate load, with the right load, if it's light enough. But if you try to do that with something super heavy, you're going to injure yourself, right? So these concepts are the same.
So you have a hot date coming up and you look in your closet and all you see are the old, ugly clothes that you usually wear and you're going to wear tonight. It's time to end that, guys. That's why we've partnered with Viore Clothing, because they have some amazing athleisure clothes that you can wear in the gym when working out, but also clothes that you can wear on a date
or during Hanukkah or whatever. You can wear these clothes wherever and they feel amazing. Some of our favorites are the Ponte Performance line, which has dream knit fabric, which literally feels so soft on your skin. But they also have this. This is the Rise tee, also soft, also feels nice and fits great. And they have a lot of amazing clothes that you need to check out to step your fashion game up. We're trying to help you out. Andrew, where can they get it?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys got to head over to viori.com/power project. That's VUORI.com/power project, and you'll automatically receive 20% off your order. Links to them down in the description as well as the podcast show notes. Is there, where does static stretching fall in with all of this then?
I don't think that's, the thing is when they talk about static stretching, like in this post, I can see it being not good for people in isolation. In isolation, meaning people that aren't doing anything else than static stretching. It's like yoga. They always use yoga as an example. And I can understand why yoga is being used as an example, because many people that just do yoga don't really do much else in terms of strength training, right? So they do end up having a lot of ligament laxity. They do end up being, having hypermobility, and they can easily injure themselves. But when you're someone who does strength training, whether it's calisthenics or whether it's weightlifting, and you choose to do some stretching, I think that can be very good for you. I've seen that be like jujitsu people. They do a lot of mobility work, and they can stretch all the time. I stretch all the time too. I know many people that do, but they do it along with strength training. So I feel as if you have strength training, which develops ligament strength, muscle strength, bone strength through ranges of motion. So you now have the ability for that, and then you also do passive mobility work or like stretching, and you get into these ranges of motion, not too excessively. So you're not holding these poses for like 3 or 4 minutes at a time, but you're just getting into those ranges of motion, pushing them a little bit. It seems as if those things can balance things out. It doesn't seem like something that can feel so good is negative. Just like only lifting in isolation, only doing high intensity lifting. We can see how that actually degrades the athletes of people who only lift. Only stretching in isolation, we can see how that degrades the bodies of people who only stretch. Mix these two things together, why wouldn't that be okay? Because I said, again, there's so many people who have that ability, and we see them. And like Ben Patrick's an example. I know they don't like Ben, but many of those guys in ATG are well muscled, but they have great mobility. You can do both, but probably doing one in isolation isn't the best idea.
I think stretching and lifting they're fairly similar in a lot of ways. There's like some lengthening and shortening of the muscles and so forth. Static stretching, I think it is something you can get hurt with, but if you look at like when people are doing yoga, people that are good at yoga, people that have been practicing it for a long time, they don't even really view it as stretching. They don't view it as like sometimes we don't even really view our lifting that we do as lifting. We view it as like movement, right? Because we're used to it and we've gotten to be pretty good at it. So it's like, I'm going to go in the gym and move a little bit. But if someone else tried some of the stuff that we're doing, they would probably get pretty sore and they'd be pretty tired from it. But a yoga instructor, they could be talking to you as they're in this crazy position where you go to get in that position. You're like, am I doing this right? You can't breathe. You're just in this real compromised position and the muscles are so tight, that it feels like something's going to snap.
Can I add something to that real quick? Please don't lose your train of thought. You feel like something's going to snap. I remember years ago when doing the pigeon stretch, getting into that position used to feel like a stretch. Now I can just sit with my legs in that position and just plop my body down. But because my brain is like, yeah, you can relax, I can just plop my body down. It doesn't feel like a stretch. That's not unsafe, right? So what you're saying is a big point there. It's like if you're someone who strength trains or if you do jujitsu, there will be a certain point where these positions that used to feel like you couldn't breathe, you're sweating, now you can just get into them. Like in jujitsu, people can put my knee to my head and invert me, and I can have a full conversation with them without feeling uncomfortable. But then I can also push the fuck out of that position, right? So that it's an ability that's built.
Yeah, I think it's a capacity, and you want whatever the sport is that you're playing, it's nice to have an over capacity for that sport. So you're playing something like football. It's good if you have a capacity not to just run one 40-yard dash at a 4.3. It's good if you can run multiple. It's good if you have a better capacity. If you're better conditioned, you're going to be better for the game. You're going to be more durable, less likely to get hurt in the fourth quarter and things of that nature. And so that means that when you train, that you got to push it every once in a while. You do have to push past certain restrictions. But again, if you are not restrictions, but you do have to push past certain percentages. But I do think for kind of the average person, and I hate using that term because I don't even really know what it means, but for somebody that just wants to get fit and they want to be more mobile, they want to move good, they want to feel good, they want longevity, there's really not a lot of reasons to do like real risky stuff. Like the level of risky stuff can go way, way down. Mm-hmm. I realize that could be boring, but you can train very safely following just a regular old bodybuilding routine. And maybe you get some other movement in there. Maybe you pick up a med ball. Maybe you pull a sled. Maybe you do some farmer's carries. Like maybe you mix up just a couple other things. Do some pull-ups with full range of motion. You mix in a couple other lifts, a couple other things, or even just play a sport here and there on the weekend, something like that. You should be able to be totally safe. But I think we can really run into problems when we get competitive, or we can really run into problems when we're trying to really force something that's just not there.
One thing I think is tough though is I've seen some people what functional patterns I mentioned to that guy Gabo. They were saying that what you're doing is going to get a lot of people injured, or the stuff you're showing is going to get a lot of people injured. And the thing is like when some people see his stuff, when I see his stuff, I'm like, damn, I want to be able to do that. Okay, let me see if I can work myself towards that. Let me see what I can do. And there have been times where I've tried certain things where I'm like, ooh, dang, okay, that's too much for me right now. But I'll figure out ways to build towards it. And I think that's, if you are someone who's watching somebody's stuff and you're like, I want to be able to do that with my body, why not? Mm-hmm. It's going to be tough and it's going to feel uncomfortable. And maybe you don't start there. Maybe you start somewhere else. And maybe on the way to building that ability, you pull something, right? That doesn't mean that thing's a bad thing to do because we have seen certain people do it. Again, like we mentioned, stretching in isolation all the time might not be the best idea. But slowly building towards that, it's like when now you're able to do it, it's no longer a dangerous thing, right? So it's tough because I don't like using that like average, but someone who hasn't trained much, if they want a certain type of movement ability, that's their body. You should be able to do a lot of different things with your body, right? And if that's what you want to try to do, there should be no reason you shouldn't try to get there.
Yeah, and just understanding that the riskier that it is, the more likely, like if you're really dead set on learning how to do a backflip, like the odds of you getting hurt are probably pretty good. Odds of you hitting your head or landing awkwardly, or at least hurting your feet a bunch because you keep smashing your toes on the ground or something. There's going to be more risk if
squatting 1,000 pounds.
Yeah. If all you want to do is like look good, then I think the risk goes way down. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you want to lift big weights, you're going to run into injuries. For myself, I got hurt a bunch in training, but a lot of that was, I'd say most of that was like experimental. I was like always trying something new or trying something different. I would try different positions and then I would learn from that. So I would get hurt, but I think almost every time I would come back better and stronger because I learned something new. I learned something different. I mean, I remember, really taxing those good mornings for a long time, the chain suspended good mornings, and I just put them lower and lower and lower all the way, till my head was like way down in between my legs. And I would do movement out of there. And I just learned, okay, it doesn't need to be that low. Like that's excessive. It doesn't need to be that low. The weight doesn't need to be that high. You don't need to do triples. You don't need to do singles. You can do like sets of 6 or sets of 8. You can use less weight. And so these are all things that I don't know how else I would have learned it without trying it. It's like, okay, when I go down this low, this starts to equate to me deadlifting or me squatting, 850 pounds. When I go down lower, now I'm squatting 900 pounds. I go down lower, now I'm squatting 1,000 pounds. But there was like a tipping point. Like, okay, now the chains are way too low and the risk to reward is no longer there. When I look back on some of the stuff I did lifting wise, like just a lot of the lifts in general they're just dangerous. But can I pick up a cable and twist with it in the gym the way that you see a lot of functional patterns people do? I think you can do that forever, which is great. I think they're onto something really cool to where not only can you train your body, but you can train your body to move better, which is amazing. And I think that's what a lot of people are after. A lot of people want to be able to be more athletic. But another criticism of functional patterns is I don't really see a lot of high-level athletes coming from their practice. And we have a microphone right here that's empty. And anyone from functional patterns can come over here to this empty microphone. They've been invited on the show many times, but we still haven't had anybody come on the show. It'd be great to get in further discussion because I do think that they have a lot of great principles. And I would love to discuss it and ask them a lot of questions like, hey, like, is a bench press like a garbage movement? Is deadlift a garbage movement? Do we need to get rid of it? And thank you, FP representative.
I think they would deadlift in a certain way and they'd probably press in a certain way, but it wouldn't be the classic way we see it in Buddha in the gym.
Yeah. And I've done functional patterns and I really like it. I found it to be super beneficial. It's something I'll continue to do. I'll continue to even utilize one of their coaches and stuff like that. I think they got a great thing going, but I would love to get into more discussion with them rather than them just clipping this. It'd be great if they actually would show up here and be on the show.
Yeah, I think I'm about to get clipped to straight. I can see it now. The clip of me saying Pillsbury Doughboy and well.
Just wait 10 to 15, whatever they say. But so I was making myself crack up back here because Mark, you were saying like the stretching and lifting are kind of similar. And I'm like, yeah, but if we're doing bicep curls, like we can go to failure. But if we're stretching, that's definitely not something we would necessarily want to go to failure. But then I started thinking like, well, Kador Ziani's philosophy on injuries. If you guys can help me out, I'm trying to remember everything, but he was kind of seeing it as almost like as a blessing because as a teacher, because like, okay, you have a limit. We all know we have this limit unless we're exploring where that limit may be, we'll never know. So we're saying, okay, well, maybe 70% is all you need. How do you know what your 70% actually is?
Having a capable body is an interesting thing. It would be like giving somebody that likes to ride a motorcycle. It'd be like giving them a motorcycle and saying, "Hey, never go over 50 miles an hour." Like when you have a good good body, you want to fucking rev the engine and kind of see what this is all about. And so admittedly, we make stupid decisions sometimes. We try things that are maybe outside of what we're doing. But on the topic of stretching and getting into like a kind of like max effort or failure mode, when Kador was here, I was doing like a stretch and he was like pushing on my head. And it's like adding a lot of tension. And so I would equate that to being like a max effort. I couldn't stretch any further than the position that I was in. It actually felt good. But I think that stretching like that is just something you got to be really careful with because I have stretched like that before where you do a movement and then all of a sudden something kind of like slips in your back or something. You're like, what the hell was that? So stretching just needs to be respected a lot. It's way more dangerous than we give it credit. I don't think we think it has any danger to it. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It can be dangerous.
One thing is that I think is so interesting about this, and Kador even mentioning injury as a teacher, is the fact that like, think back, it's even kind of hard to think back to like maybe when you first started resistance training and started lifting. I remember when I first started barbell squatting, like getting into the bottom of the squat felt dangerous with load on my back.
Oh yeah.
Legitimately felt dangerous. And over time I was just like, wow, how do people have so much knee flexion when they do this? Or like, how do they get so low where their squat looks so pretty? And as I try to do that, I'd be like, oh my God, wow, this feels dangerous. But then as you progress and as your body becomes more familiar with the mechanics of the movement, as certain areas become stronger to be able to handle those pressures that take you down into a squat, it doesn't become dangerous anymore. And then you also get better at feeling what sketchiness is. The thing is like, if you never venture into that territory, then you never know what's sketch. Because like, for example, that pigeon thing that you saw Gabo get injured in, I saw another guy that got injured in it. And I was watching that video and he just like, something happened at the top of his femur. And as I was doing it, I was doing that movement, I was really trying to find, okay, when someone's lifting, you have to have the skill of knowing when to drop the bar, knowing when to get the fuck out of the movement, or knowing where your limit is. Because the best way to be able to progress is getting close to that limit, but not exceeding it, and not like hitting that limit too many times within a session. It's getting there and coming out. Seated good morning, going as far down as you can and coming out of the movement safely. But someone who's never done that seated good morning, like I get my chest to the bench, someone who doesn't do it, they might go down and then come up at a higher level. But if they try to go down all the way to the bottom, they'll injure themselves. But again, the only way is by just like respecting sketchiness, right? Like, I think there's a tendency initially, when you do something really new, where you push the boundaries a little bit, you learn your lesson, and then you know how to push the boundary. But you have to get there, right?
It allows you to be that healthy tree limb. Remember we were talking about that? So like the dry, very rigid tree limb that doesn't want to move anywhere, the second, you can go up to it and snap it. But if that tree limb is healthy and it's all bendy, you try to bend it, it doesn't break. But if you're not exploring some of these ranges, you're always going to be that.
Ruining our environment, Andrew.
Sorry.
Over here,
I just fucking every tree I just run up to,
but like
just try to kick trees down.
I know we're gonna play this video, but I think something really to think about is like, when you feel like something is sketchy in your training, don't continue pushing that boundary. Because sometimes I've done this in the past. You're like, oh, I'm just pushing the limit a little bit. Let me try this, and then you pull something. That was your body's trigger of saying, chill.
Don't be stupid.
Don't be stupid. And then I think there's also one thing I think that could help a lot of people in the long run. We talked about this before, is breathing while you're doing a lot of these movements. The tendency of lifting is you lift so heavy that you hold your breath when you lift. You're doing a shoulder press, it's heavy, so you're there's this inconsistent breathing. And we know, like in jiu-jitsu, when you hold your breath, your body feels like you're in danger.
You just made my back hurt breathing like that. Because I was just thinking, like, if I was overhead pressing like that, like I'd be like, oh my God, I think I tweaked something.
Right? But if you're using a load that will allow you to get into that range, and you're also breathing as you're doing it, so you're comfortable enough to be able to breathe as you're doing it, then your body's like, okay, this range is okay, this range is okay. And then also, if you're not lifting super fast, you're doing these motions you have like a tempo to what you do, you'll be able to pay attention to where something is sketchy. Because when lifters lift very quickly, they're able to kind of just breeze through those areas of discomfort or breeze through those areas of sketchiness. And then something happens real quick because they weren't paying attention. But when you do have a tempo to the way you lift, and you're controlling that eccentric, you're holding the pause, you're controlling it up, you can start to feel where in your lift do you have a weakness, which is why a lot of people do tempo squats or even pause squats at the bottom. They'll be able to feel, oh, that's where I'm weak. That's where I'm weak. Okay, let me develop that range of strength, right? So it's all things to think about.
TRT, it's a popular topic. A lot of guys are hopping on it. It's something that we've talked about a lot. And you might think you're a candidate, but how would you know if you haven't got your blood work done and you don't know where your markers are? That's why we've partnered with Merrick Health, owned by Derek from More Plates, More Dates. And the cool thing about Merrick is you'll get your blood work done, and you'll also have a patient care coordinator that can help you analyze your blood work, analyze your testosterone, all these other markers to help you actually figure out if you're someone who needs TRT, because there could be things that you could be doing nutritionally, with supplements, or even with your lifestyle that can boost your testosterone to the levels that they should actually be at. Andrew, how can they get their hands on it?
Yes, that's over at merrickhealth.com/powerproject. And at checkout, enter promo code POWERPROJECT to save 10% off the Power Project panel, the checkup panel, or any individual lab that you select. Again, that's at merrickhealth.com/powerproject, promo code POWERPROJECT at checkout, links in the description, as well as the podcast show notes. Yeah. Or what's this, so you want me to play this video?
Play this video because Mark brought up the Eastern Bloc.
Okay. Do we need audio or?
Yeah, I think we play the audio. I don't think there's music. But one thing is like you'll see a lot of like these Eastern Bloc guys, Chinese lifters. They not only do they respect their lifting, but they respect their movement ability more than I think other lifters do.
Let's see.
So
Hello everyone. Today we'll discuss about how we can create a deep, stable sitting position. Back squats, front squats, of course, overhead position. Not like that, not like that, not somehow like that.
Look how he can move there.
Stable, we can dance under the bar, we can do everything. I will show you one of the best exercises how we can create it. Very useful exercise for kids, adults, every type of sport. Just regular overhead walking in deep sitting position or ducks walking.
Remember Rocky did that with the log on his back.
Many kids, many athletes do this exercise absolutely not correct. First of all, they sit down with relaxing back. They walk like that. They hold like that, like that, like that, like that, but not straight. Hold arms straight. Then sit down. First time, sit down somewhere like that or like that, like that. This exercise is absolutely enough to make with stick or very light kids barbell. Stance, like your shoulders wide. Snatch, grip. Hold barbell overhead, lats together, elbows locked, chest up, diaphragm up, abs.
That's funny. He was making fun of me the whole time.
Yeah, but I mentioned that because like I mean you look at Klokov, you look at this guy, you
These
look
guys
at
are super strong too.
Ilya, like all these guys, not only are they able to put 400 something pounds above their head, but then they're also able to be mobile and strong enough to walk, to do crazy stuff in these positions, right? Because they respect the way they move, or they don't let weight mess up the way they move.
They spend a lot of time in those positions too, doing those movements over and over again. And so then they can do, it's easier for them to like show off and do tricks from those positions. Do you, you guys think that, you know, sometimes people are maybe like pushing the boundaries a little bit, like you're filming stuff to try to instruct or to try to show people. And, you know, that guy's doing this like pigeon stretch and his pigeon stretch might be somebody else's, you know, 500-pound bench or something. And so he's like taking it maybe a little further than normal because he knows he's being observed because he's like filming it for something. I kind of wonder if that's like a little bit of a part of it, just kind of almost like social media, or just that guy, maybe not even so much social media, but that guy feeling really good about his ability to do that. You know, same thing again with someone benching 500. If they can do a couple reps with it, they feel really good in doing that. And so like, that makes them feel good. And so they're drawn to that. They want to go and do that. They maybe want to like not just show other people, but show themselves. And then that's how you get hurt.
Well, he posted it.
Yeah.
He didn't have to post it. That's the thing. He could have totally left that and not told anybody about his injury, dealt with it and gone about it the other way. But he mentioned, this is a new movement that I've done. I've never done this before. I did this while fatigued. I knew my body was beat up, but I still attempted it. Yeah, this was a lesson. And I think it's a lesson that was taught well, and that it actually was pretty gutsy for him to still post that because, again, Functional Patterns takes that and says how going to these ranges is dangerous and it's injury. But then you see someone like Gabo, who is built and has great muscle and can move really well and has great calisthenic along with just strength in general, shows himself getting injured and then teaches you, hey, this is some things to think about. Don't try to do new movements when you're fatigued. Like it's, I get what you mean by the social media thing, because some people will just do wild stuff for the camera and then post it up. But like this was a failure. It's like getting under a load and then ripping something. Right. That's so.
I definitely agree with both of you. And the other aspect is like, we'll even just use like that example of like squatting or something. If somebody puts, you know, the 5 plates on the bar, it's like, oh, this is way different. Like this, I couldn't go do that at my local 24-hour gym or whatever. But like a pigeon stretch, it's like anybody can get into almost any stretch, right? Like anybody can make different variations of that stretch. And so for the social media thing, it's like, well, since everybody can do this, how can I do it? Like, how can I one up everybody? So I think that's where the need to like one up each other comes from. I think there's definitely that.
I also think like when it comes to stuff like this, there's a need to show progression over time. Something that I've been trying to really do is show like, if like, for example, that Copenhagen hop, like not everyone, most people should not start with the Copenhagen hop. They shouldn't even start with like the extended Copenhagen with their leg on a bench or extended all that way and putting all that stress in their groin, because most people who have never really worked on that area could pull something. So there's easier ways to regress yourself to being able to progress to that kind of stress. Because now cold, I can go and do that hop, but it didn't used to feel that way. It was something that was very sketch that I had to build up to. And with all of these things, you build up to them. But just because you have to progress towards it, because there's a beginning part, that doesn't mean that it automatically is something that's injurious or it automatically is something that is dangerous that you shouldn't try out. It just means that there's a level that you need to start at. There's always someone squatting 800 pounds started with someone squatting a barbell.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you got to always you got to take it slow, and it's going to take time to be able to build in anything. I think what the body can do is kind of amazing, and I think that might be some of the frustrating part, is that you have the ability to see how other people can use their body and maybe even in some cases abuse their body, and you're like, well, I should be able to do that. But maybe you shouldn't be able to do that. Like maybe you don't have access to that for a reason, and maybe it's going to take you some time. And maybe that would be probably the best route, is for you to really just be cautious and take your time. I'm sure you guys saw Bones Jones. He tore his pec, right?
I mean, after you mentioned it,
yeah, it's just shitty. I guess he did it like sparring or something, but. We have a clip from Ian Danny talking about how Ian has no relation to Bones Jones. I don't think he coaches him, or I don't believe that they know each other or anything, but he said he got asked a lot of questions about it. So he made some speculation on why he thinks some athletes get hurt. So maybe we can kind of pull up that clip.
Also, check out Ian's page. I think there's a lot more there. He is great. I saw him from you. You showed him to me once, and he's amazing.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast a long time ago. We got to bring him back.
That was before I was here. Yeah. I want you guys to imagine that you're wearing a cast on your hand, and you're going through your whole day with this cast hand. Well, because your fingers don't move, your hand will start to become stiff, weak, and that'll work its way up your arm. That's the same thing that happens when you wear these damn shoes, okay? I'm sorry to curse, but it's frustrating, because these shoes that have a narrow toe box, although they look nice and they're Nikes, narrow toe box so your toes can't move. They're not flat, so your foot is in this weird thing and it's not getting stronger. And they're not flexible, so they don't move, and your foot just moves like this all day, which means your feet are getting weaker. That's why we partner with Vivo Barefoot shoes. They have a bunch of shoes for the gym and casual shoes, but the thing about these shoes is that they are wide, they are flat, and they are flexible. So your foot can do what it needs to do, and it can get stronger over time. That's going to allow you to be a better, stronger athlete. Andrew, how can they get them?
Yes, that's over at vivobarefoot.com/powerproject. When you guys get there, you'll see a code across the top. Make sure you use that code for 15% off your entire order. Again, vivobarefoot.com/powerproject. Links in the description, as well as the podcast show notes.
Throw these away.
Oh my God. Dude, watch the camera.
Everyone's been blowing me up about the John Jones pec injury, so I'm going to stop in the middle of my workout to comment on it. First, all I want to say is sometimes shit happens and injuries just happen, so what I'm about to say is not an implication that this is exactly why this injury happened. But I do see a lot of pec and bicep injuries that happened unnecessarily because athletes are being told to avoid big ranges of motion and deep shoulder and big extension ranges of motion. And it's the complete wrong piece of advice you need. What you need to do is get into those big ranges under big load and at high speed and train those vulnerable positions regularly so that when you get into them, you won't get injured. And people will say, oh no, that's a bodybuilding move and train a movement, not a muscle. Bullshit. This is a real move. Get into that position. It happens all the time in sport. And if you don't, you're going to suffer the consequences. Everyone's been...
a really great clip.
He's so good.
Him, saying shit happens. That's interesting, right? Like this, Ian has coached some of the best athletes that you could possibly think of, and still works with a lot of great pro athletes. So for him to say shit happens, that's interesting. But yeah, I think shit does just happen. I mean, we've talked about that a bunch of times on the show. Like, you ever just wake up and you can barely walk, your ankle hurts for some reason. You're like, I have no idea what this is from. This is even before I started running. Just wake up sometimes and something's like locked up, or your knee is locked up weird, and you're like, what the hell is that? Half hour later, it's gone. You're like, what? Like, whatever was bugging you is like, it's not there anymore. So I think the human body is, I don't know. It's weird. It's strange. I don't think everything can always be explained. And I certainly don't think everything can always be explained by science. And I think we need people to continually discover stuff and continually to push. But, when you look at someone like Ian Danny, who does have a really awesome track record with the many athletes that he's worked with over the years, it also doesn't mean that he's right either. Like, what it means is that he has found some stuff that he feels is working really well. Are there still better ways? Are there still ways that things can even be made to be more optimal? And I think so. And I think that's what's exciting is that, and I think Ian would admit that, like, especially, I'm sure that when he was a younger coach, he just wasn't as good. And now that he's older and been around for a longer time, he's better. But does he have blind spots? I think we all have blind spots. And so it's really hard to say what's going to keep these athletes healthy. And when you have, I mean, just watch a football game for 5 minutes on a Sunday. Just watch this tiny bit of it, Nsima. Watch a tiny bit of it, and just look at how fast these fucking guys are flying around the field. It's a wonder that people don't get hurt on every single play. It's a miracle that people don't get devastated on every single. I mean, they do kind of get devastated on every single play, but it is insane how fast those guys are moving around. And I don't think there's a curl or a twist or anything that we can do to necessarily prevent those injuries. We could make ourselves more durable against some of those injuries and some of those predicaments, but I don't think we can completely solve that riddle.
I agree. Like, what you said is what people can do. They can make their body more resilient and more durable for these stresses of what's about to ensue. Because, I mean, even watching that thing with who's that quarterback Netflix thing?
Oh yeah, Mahomes,
right? When, like, with him and all those other guys, like, the amount of things that they have to do after every single game and the amount that they get beat up, it's like they got. It's just that there are little nicks and things everywhere that happen throughout a whole season, right? The fact that they're not getting fucked up every game is amazing, but they're getting fucked up. You know what I mean? It's and with a sport like that, yeah, that makes sense. But exactly this, like, if you can make the body resilient, you can handle the stress better. And it's not something that's going to take you out, because when you're taken out, then you're fucked.
I think whatever you're doing is working pretty good, because, like, you are competing at such a high level, and then you come here and you're still in one piece.
Yeah.
I mean, every once in a while I've seen you in 2 pieces a couple times, but you're in one piece.
Yeah. And I feel better. I feel better than I really, like, I just feel amazing, better than the years before.
And you have to kind of manage, like, the way, you have to really manage and really pay attention to the way that you lift, the way that you eat, the way that you sleep, the amount of just overall just work and overall stress. You got to kind of manage all of that all the time, right?
I think one thing that Andrew said is, like, athletes kind of think that if they're not feeling, that they need to work through the feeling of being beat up. That when they're feeling super fatigued and they're walking around a little bit and they feel some shit in their knees and their back and their shoulders, that if they're not in training the next day, they're failures and that they're not going to make progress. But I think it's more so the fact that, like, you have to learn how to, you have to develop a body that doesn't feel that level of pain all the time. But then when you do feel something, you need to know when to back up. Just like in the gym, when you need to know when you need to abandon the stretch or not go as deep into that range of motion, when you need to put the load down or lower the weight, when you need to not go to practice, or if you do choose to go to practice, you need to choose not to roll with that person or to roll with way less intensity so nothing gets worse.
Yeah, when you feel like shit, it's like the your dashboard on your car like lighting up. It's like saying recover.
The tire sensor that you never fix.
Oh yeah. Hey, and it doesn't matter how rich you are they? Those things are always fucked up. But yeah, it's like you have on your forehead, it's just flashing, recover, and you're like, nah, I'm gonna go do it anyway.
Yeah, just wait till I get to the next stop. You should be fine.
Yeah.
Dude, no, but I have this conversation with like, there's some people I roll with where, they're dealing with some shit. And there's a competition coming up, and they're gonna get ready and compete. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about other people I know currently.
I know. I was just laughing because we had that conversation too.
Yeah, where I'm like, okay, dog, you're going to somebody to get this stuff worked on this Friday, and then you're competing next week. Are you sure you want to compete next week? Like, you sure that's a good idea? Because another competition's coming, and if you can just rehab this without going into a scenario where the person you're rolling with is going to take, if they get in any position, they're not going to armbar you softly. They're going to put it on you. Can your body handle that right now? Or are you risking a bigger injury for the sake of competing or for the sake of continuing to go to practice 6 days a week? Right?
Something I just wanted to point out that I got from Brandon from Strict Vision Athletics. I thought it was pretty cool, but we were talking about Ian Denny, and it's like with Paul, like it feels like he's now Poliquin, where Poliquin was. And I thought that like the passing of that, it wasn't an official passing of the torch, but I was like, I think that's so fitting because he has so much good information. Like it's hard to think of like who's better in like right now. You know what I mean? I just thought that was really cool, and it just reminded me when we brought up that clip.
Yeah. Ian is amazing. He's got his own like supplement line, and he's got all kinds of cool stuff going on. We should go visit his gym. His gym is like, it's unbelievable. It couldn't be more perfectly set up for athletes. He's got red light therapy. He's got cold plunges. He's got saunas.
He's got 2 saunas, an infrared and a full sauna.
Yeah, he has all that shit. Anything that could potentially help you with recovery or whatever. He's got everything there. He's got the turf. He's got 2 levels of just tons of equipment. He probably has more shit than like when I was there a couple of years ago, because that's just the way it goes. You pile up all that stuff.
And it's in Arizona, so yeah, we should definitely go.
I sent you another video from Ian and Andy. That's like a super cool video to pull up.
Let's see.
We're going to start doing a little segment on the show where we're going to start to kind of highlight some of these folks on Instagram, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. TikTok.
The tick. There we go. Sorry.
Kettlebell swings, I love them. They're a great tool to develop explosiveness, strengthen the posterior chain. They're great to develop endurance and conditioning. They work well for that too. I love loading them in multiple different ways too. Like I like using a pin and getting a really big load on them. I like being a little bit lighter and faster. There's multiple ways to use them. But one thing I will tell you about a kettlebell is it does have a significant limitation. And that is when you're swinging a kettlebell, you're doing something that's a little bit different and quite unnatural what happens in the real world. When you're exploding into something, you're throwing something, you're moving at your highest velocity with your biggest amount of force at the end as you would basically be releasing the implement. Because on a kettlebell swing, you don't do that. You have to start slowing down the implement and then letting it fall back to you. You're basically training your nervous system to do something different than what really happens, and you're not really getting the full effect of it. If you just train for CrossFit or whatever it is, you just want to get into condition to get a little bit stronger, you never have to do anything different. If you're an athlete, if you sprint, if you jump, if you do those types of things, it's really good to use a medicine ball or another implement, even a kettlebell that you can actually throw, where you finish through the end of it and you release it all the way to the end. That way you get to finish, you go through, and you do it the way you normally have to do it, where you're moving at your maximum velocity at the end, and there's no braking to stop the end of it. So you're recreating what actually happens in the real world. And in that sense, throwing the implement, whether it's a kettlebell or a medicine ball, is actually a much better tool to develop explosiveness. And you could also do them together for a little bit of a contrast training effect if you'd like to do that as well with a very, very heavy kettlebell swing.
Don't ever let that guy put his hands on you. Why? Because he can hurt you really bad.
Really?
He like does like active release therapy type stuff.
Uh-huh.
And man, he loves just digging in there.
Yeah.
He's like, he just crushes you.
I can't wait to meet him because like I've been really scouring through his content. I'm like, wow, it's so good. The content.
You've been gobbling it up.
Gobbling up that content. But wait, let's talk about that kettlebell thing real quick because what does that remind you of, Andrew?
What are you talking about?
We talked about throwing a kettlebell.
Throwing a kettlebell.
Think about it. When you are flipping a kettlebell, you release it at the top, then you take that inertia back.
Yeah.
So you can that's why throwing a kettlebell feels so good, and juggling a kettlebell at high intensity, even when it's a heavier bell, feels good because you throw it and you release it, then you catch it versus swing and pull it back down. That's how that applies. So that's why it doesn't just look fancy. Throwing a kettlebell can be a more functional thing with a kettlebell.
Especially if you're out in some grass, you can chuck it around and you don't have to really worry about the thing getting beat up or broken or whatever.
You all right for this clip?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what we got here now.
I stretch all the time, but I'm still tight. Well, there's a couple things with that. First off, do you really stretch all the time? Because I know some people, they stretch for a couple of weeks, they still feel tight, and they're like, I'm done. At the end of the day, if you were to lift for 2 weeks and your muscles didn't grow, would you be like, no? It takes time. You got to put in the time in stretching. But if you're putting in the time and you still feel tight, it's not going. There's a couple other things that could be going on here. One is you might need to get palpation and work on those tissues because the fascia might just be so bound up that the actual liquid component of the fascia is made up of a solid and a liquid component, is actually dried up and dehydrated because everything's been so mashed up for so long. It's not getting stuff in there. So you might need to get work on the tissues, get hydration, get that into the tissues. That's going to help you. The other thing is you may not have end range strength. If you're really weak at end range strength, your brain is not going to let you really get into those ranges. So you might want to train some stuff at end range. Look at the actual training you're doing. If you're constantly doing shortened range of motions, partials, all those types of things, you're not going to get flexible as easily as if you're using full range of motion under load with all your exercises. So it goes back to our rule. Let your programming dictate your mobility first. If you are properly training full ranges of motion under load, that's going to lead to better stretching and better mobility.
I love Ian Danny.
Really good.
I love Ian Danny, dog.
I'm going to hit that heart button
He's
on air.
so good.
Well, bam.
You've been talking about my fascia release forever.
Ah, yeah.
That was such a great explanation on why it helps so much.
Yeah, he crushed it.
Yeah.
He's super smart. He's like a computer, man. It's unbelievable.
No, it's sad that I just learned about him recently, but how long has he been? He's been in the game for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Forever.
Just don't Google him. You might think differently of him.
Oh, okay.
Uh-oh.
No, it doesn't matter. It's public information. He's had some athletes get busted over the years.
Okay.
No, it's not.
I thought it was something.
Oh, he's
bad.
whipping his dick out or something.
Oh, good.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
At least it's not public knowledge. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Either way, that guy's a genius.
Yeah, he's amazing. Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.
If you guys enjoyed this episode and you're thinking of hopping on PEDs, well, check out this one because it might make you want to hop on PEDs or it might make you rethink that. But it was really fun. You want some TRT? Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Click it. You'll like it. Click.